Sprecher. Wir zwei haben ja häufiger schon mal darüber geredet, Markus, ob wir selber, ich auch und meine Kollegen hier einfach ja immer den Eindruck verbreitet haben, dass der wirklich alles im Griff hat und wir so ein bisschen den Teppich drüber gelegt haben über das, was negativ war, was vielleicht schwach und dement wirkte. Aber ehrlicherweise, mir ging es genau wie dir. Die New York Times und andere haben am nächsten Tag auch wirklich die Schlagzeile gemacht. Er zeigt, dass er die Außenpolitik voll drauf hat.
Okay, let's talk about Biden for a second.
Yeah.
You have said that he is the worst. I actually want to quote this, make sure I get it right. You have said that he is the worst president in the history of this country. Worse even than James Buchanan?
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't say James Buchanan.
No, you didn't say James Buchanan. You said
okay.
Biden is the worst president in the history of the country.
All right.
With him about to leave office.
Yes.
Do you want to revise that, or do you stand by it?
No, I do stand by it, and I say this without any personal animus at all. I mean, in some ways, I actually kind of feel sorry for Joe Biden. I mean, he's in the twilight years of his life. He is not, obviously, has not been in charge for some time, and I know this by personal observation, and now the whole world knows it, and it's been very, very concerning to me over the last, year and a half since I've had this position.
Can you tell us a story when you say personal observation? What kind
well,
of thing did you see?
It's public now because the Wall Street Journal got it and put it on the front page. But January a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I had been asked. I became Speaker in October 2023, and there were all sorts of big national security concerns and everything going on. And I started requesting a meeting with the president because I'm kind of old school. I'm a constitutional law guy. The Speaker of the House should be able to talk to the president, especially in times of great national interest and calamity. But they wouldn't let me meet with him, and his staff kept giving me excuses. This went on for like 8 or 9 weeks. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't have time. What are you talking about? I'm second in line of the presidency. He has time. I need to talk to him. We had, I can't say the classified parts, but we had some big national concerns at the time that I was losing sleep over. Finally, I just went to the Hill Press Corps and I said, the president is not being allowed to meet with the speaker. There's a problem. So they started putting pressure on him. Long story short, they finally relented. They invited me to the White House. I show up and I realize it's actually an ambush because it's not just me and the president. It's also Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem, the CIA director, everybody. And then, so I walked in the Oval and I know what this is. They're going to hotbox the speaker on Ukraine funding. That's what it was. This is probably third week of January. We sit down, we're in the midst of it, and the whole conversation, and I'm going, we don't need to have this conversation. The president reaches over just like this. We're sitting right next to the fireplace in the Oval, and he grabs my arm and he says, the speaker and I just need a couple minutes together. Would y'all just leave us alone? And I looked up on the faces of some of the staff standing around the wall, and they're like, oh, no, he did it. So he called it. He's the commander-in-chief. So everybody leaves, and he and I are standing awkwardly in the middle of the Oval Office, right over the rug by that coffee table. And I said, Mr. President, thanks for the moments. This is very important. I got some big national security things I need to talk to you about that I've heard and I think you know, and what do we do? But first, real quickly, Mr. President, can I ask you a question? I cannot answer this from my constituents in Louisiana. Sir, why did you pause LNG exports to Europe? Like, I don't understand, liquefied natural gas is in great demand by our allies. Why would you do that? Because you understand, we just talked about Ukraine. You understand you're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because they got to get their gas from him, And he looks at me, stunned with this, and he said, I didn't do that. And I said, Mr. President, yes, you did. It was an executive order, 3 weeks ago. And he goes, no, I didn't do that. And he's arguing with me. I said, Mr. President, respectfully, could I go out here and ask your secretary to print it out? We'll read it together. You definitely did that. And he goes, oh, you talk about natural gas. Yes, sir. He said, no, you misunderstand. He said, what I did is I signed this thing we're gonna conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, you're not, sir. You paused it. I know. I have the export terminals in my state. I talked to those people this morning. This is doing massive damage to our economy, national security. It occurred to me, Barry, he was not lying to me. He genuinely did not know what he had signed. And I walked out of that meeting with fear and loathing because I thought, we're in serious trouble. Who is running the country? I don't know who put the paper in front of him, but he didn't know. All right, so
Richard Nixon once famously prayed on his knees in the White House in the Lincoln bedroom with Henry Kissinger. Have you ever prayed with Donald Trump?
Yes, yeah. And I've talked to him a lot about the hand of providence and how I'm convinced that God spared his life twice on the world stage, 2 assassination attempts within 65 days or whatever it was. And right after the second assassination attempt, this is interesting, a footnote in history, but I arrived at Mar-a-Lago right after that event. We were scheduled to meet, and everything was shut down. My motorcade came in the same time his did, and we sat, my wife and I and he and Susie Wiles, Chief of Staff, sat there for 2 hours and 45 minutes in a hold room. He's still in his golf attire, and he's processing the fact that he almost had a second assassination attempt in that amount of time. And it occurred to him, and it would shake any man. He's one of the strongest people I've ever known. But he was very contemplative in that moment. And I talked to him again that day about providence, and like, this is not an accident. I don't believe in coincidence, sir. I think, this is a phenomenal thing. And I believe God's going to raise you up. The Bible's very clear. God raises up those in authority. I get accused for all, criticized for saying this all the time, but I mean, it's my worldview. But I don't believe there are accidents in this arena, and I think he's been raised up for this time. And that's a profound thing for anybody to contemplate. I think he does that. He's been talking about it. He talks about providence. He talks about how he believes in God more than ever. And I think anybody would be in his situation. But it's an interesting thing and interesting times we live in.
Favorite biblical phrase?
Bless those who persecute you. That's the one I'm practicing the most these days.
Also wir müssen uns, glaube ich, auch genauer klar werden, wo die entscheidenden Dinge liegen. Und das ist in allererster Linie die Fakten, die Sachkenntnis und dann natürlich auch, und das muss man ganz offen ansprechen, wenn es Zweifel am Geisteszustand gäbe. Bei Ronald Reagan war das sehr eindeutig, mit Alzheimer in der zweiten Amtszeit besonders. Das ist bei Joe Biden noch lange nicht so, und deswegen ist er ja gestern Abend in einem Exklusivinterview mit NBC zum Gegenangriff übergegangen und hat den Kollegen Lester Holt von NBC da auch massiv deswegen angegriffen.